Hi friends, today I am going to review the book, Hidden Truths, What Leaders Need to Hear But Are Rarely Told by David Fubini. CEOs face daunting challenges, many of which are hidden obstacles they don't see until a crisis occurs. Most business books and articles touch only on the analytical aspects of being a CEO. When crises occur, however, CEOs often find that complex issues arise with the people on their teams and boards. Complications in those relationships can become the most likely obstacles to their goals. While the rewards of running a company are great, the risks of the job are sometimes even greater. When you first move into a CEO role, the operational work you did to get to the corner office differs from what you must do now. Most people are aware of the strategic issues they must solve, but not the legal, financial, regulatory and talent issues that demand attention. From balancing immediate results with long-term staying power to dealing with viral misinformation about your company, the list of issues a CEO faces from day one is long and varied. The time frame of change has decreased. So, before you start, develop a well-thought-out vision to guide your decisions, including those you must make quickly. This turnover results from markets and investors being less patient with new CEOs, secondary private equity markets pressuring CEOs to offload unwanted assets, and board members no longer regarding firing a CEO as proof of failure on their part. New CEOs once enjoyed a honeymoon of about half a year, but now boards and investors expect them to be ready to roll before they start the job. Must-do actions include researching the company's operations, understanding how the board works, evaluating corporate financials, and investigating any SEC, FTC filings that indicate the company's legal exposure. Unfortunately, barriers to truth also begin on day one of a CEO's tenure. While incoming CEOs and other top executives can find necessary information in the public domain, they should talk to consulting firms, friendly investment bankers, former executives and people in their networks. Reaching out to competitors might highlight unforeseen issues. When CEOs fail, it's often because they've acted without the necessary information and context. Chief executives should be able to get all the information they need to make decisions. But in reality, subordinates often provide partial, prejudicial or weighted data. A senior Navy admiral said that he was certain of only two things when he was on the bridge. One was that his cup of coffee would always be hot. The other was that his staff would never tell him the entire truth. The truth may hurt, but it hurts even more when you make decisions based on misleading versions of the truth. Subordinates in operational and strategic areas often try to make negative news or issues more palatable to their bosses. In the 1980s, for example, GM designed a new minivan that provoked negative reactions from potential customers. Instead of sharing the unvarnished results, which would have nixed the design, subordinates supplied only information that enabled the van to survive senior executive review. The market delivered the bad news when GM rolled out the minivan. Ironically, even as they acknowledge this issue, many CEOs deny their organizations suffer a lack of candor. In practice, when a CEO says he or she never receives partial or skewed information, that often signals the opposite dynamic. Many examples of subordinates withholding vital information have surfaced recently. They include VW's diesel emissions, Wells Fargo's phantom retail accounts, and Boeing's MAX 737. CEOs must create cultures that encourage opposing views without retribution. They must listen carefully and not voice foregone conclusions. Bad news can and should be welcomed, as it is often the most valuable feedback about how to correct strategy. Being a CEO is an isolating job, and the networks people relied on before becoming top brass usually change. A marketing executive who did stellar work at Apple and Target, for example, became CEO of JCPenney and failed. He admits his situational arrogance got in the way. Unfortunately, no one on his executive team, either people from JCPenney or those he brought with him, commented on changes he made too quickly or without sufficient input. Corporate cultures that rely too heavily on a previously valid concept can blind people to situational realities. For example, the decline in GM's earnings and its obsession with measuring market share, a metric that selling fleets to car rental agencies buoyed up, cost the head of U.S. divisions his job. Problems also occur in siloed organizations that lack cross-functional communication or coordination. Although functional heads might report their findings up the chain, only the CEO may enjoy an integrated view of an entire project. A culture that welcomes reports of failure can generate crucial information as a means to improve quality and productivity. To make sure you hear and understand all aspects of a situation, be a transparent and blunt leader. As a CEO, your strength lies in having others give you the full story. Reward people who bring you negative news. Design processes that deliver different perspectives to you. For each specific project, set up an executive team, a functional group, and a business unit. Each will provide a different viewpoint, providing you with a clearer picture of the whole. Remove barriers to collaboration by changing incentives and by calculating financial rewards on corporate results, not the results of individual units. To understand a situation more objectively, find a third party to evaluate it, such as a consultant or board members. Set priorities and delegate. Many constituencies, from financial analysts to regulators to employee groups, will clamor for your time. Define a process to prioritize your appointments, and delegate your general counsel, CFO, or other executives to manage assigned stakeholders. Appoint a chief of staff to organize your time. Rotate this formal or informal position among high performers to gain insight into their skills. The clear priority for a CEO embarking on major shifts is to have the right people in place to make a big change successful. Determining the best way to implement change is another front and center issue for new CEOs. If you are too hesitant and choose to work with existing staff, you may find significant, even insurmountable, resistance to change. New CEOs commonly make changes and create new executive teams. Always have clear reasons for any shift, be willing to answer board concerns, and be empathetic with those you move around or let go. Even if you assemble a trusted group, you may feel isolated. Ironically, this isolation more often strikes people whom the company promotes from within. Moving to the top spot means your former peers won't be as open about issues as they once were. The hierarchical nature of companies ensures that whoever is top of the house will often be there by themselves. Because of the relentless pace, you may think you are connecting with others without realizing the depth of your isolation. If you feel depleted and alone, deal with it instead of denying it. If you espouse an open-door policy and a willingness to hear hard news, make sure your behavior reflects that stance. Model the behavior you want to instill in your team. If openness and connecting is a new management style for you, beware of the risk of moving back to your default sheltered position. Become the best listener in the company. Listening will help you connect with others and get to the reality of a situation. Leverage board involvement to solve difficult issues. The relationship between CEOs and board members is complicated. The board can hire and fire a CEO and is responsible to shareholders. Organizations are facing huge unknowns, and CEOs need the wisdom of the many to deal with the crisis. Although the board is the final arbitrator of a CEO's performance, it lacks the CEO's knowledge and hasn't done the CEO's work. Changing times mean the CEO must bridge this distance when working with the board and embrace an approach that keeps everyone accountable. This need partially stems from the increase in and complexity of mergers and acquisitions. In the past, many CEOs provided board members only with ongoing information on how acquisitions were proceeding, but not the challenges the companies faced. In that culture, boards didn't question the seemingly obvious issues that arise in any integration. Today, they do. In addition to COVID-19 pandemic issues, boards and executives are dealing with more discrimination lawsuits, global competitions, world issues, digital makeovers, and public activism. CEO job tenure is becoming shorter. The year 2019 set a record, with 1,009 CEOs resigning within the first 3 quarters of the year. It behooves a CEO, a board, and a workforce to nurture strong relationships based on honest assessments of issues at hand. Some CEOs present 500 pages of data prior to board meetings and rehash that material during the meetings. Instead, they should provide a holistic overview of the current situation and future goals. If your board members proved uninterested and are present only because they flattered someone or want financial incentives, consider changing the board. If you have the ability to reconfigure it, start with a careful search. You may think an agreeable board is good, but you really want a purposeful board. Leaders should be warier of passive boards rather than individuals who provide wise, if occasionally challenging, counsel. Check how your board works. Examine its protocols and change what is necessary to generate more board involvement. The lead director needs to be able to create a strong working relationship between the group and the CEO. Establish new traditions by taking the group to corporate locations to give them greater insight into the company and employees. Leave before the board requires it. The idea of a CEO stepping down is analogous to the journey of National Football League coach Mike Ditka. His Chicago Bears won the Super Bowl, but by the time Ditka left the team years later, his reputation was in tatters. Conversely, National Basketball Association Chicago Bulls coach Phil Jackson won 6 championships and left with his reputation intact. Most CEOs followed Ditka's path, staying long after they stopped being the right fit for their companies. You might think CEOs could recognize the time to leave, but they can't. Instead, they believe the board has only praise for them when the truth is the opposite. Most members of boards habitually question their CEO's capabilities and actions. Even the best CEOs have a Damocles sword hovering over their heads. Most CEOs acknowledge the truth of staff and board critiques, but don't believe disapproval applies to them. Even as CEOs celebrate successes, boards focus on the future and calibrate whether the CEO will continue to be a good fit. Most CEOs experience different stages of tenure, the honeymoon, and the merging of 2 companies when only one CEO will remain. At this point, it's inevitable, even obvious, that they don't have much time. Some CEOs time their exits perfectly through reasoning and good instincts. Perhaps changes in the company suggest future successes are out of their reach and they see only dwindling results. Or they may realize the company needs a new leader or a new type of leader. CEOs who step down expect the fire hose of communication to diminish. But the immediate reduction to an information trickle usually comes as a shock. Consider leaving once you define what you'll do next. Do you want to lead another organization, teach, or join a board? You have multiple options, from running a nonprofit to traveling. Whatever you choose, consider what you'd like to do before your suddenly blank calendar leaves you with excess free time. Take a ways. CEOs face daunting challenges, many of which are hidden obstacles they don't see until a crisis occurs. When CEOs fail, it's often because they've acted without the necessary information and context. Set priorities and delegate. Leverage board involvement to solve difficult issues. Leave before the board requires it. If you enjoy our content and would like to stay updated with our latest videos, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Your support means a lot to us. Thanks you so much for watching.